In a recent video that went a little bit viral, I shared some of the hardest lessons I've learned in the last 10 years in the music industry. It was a relatively short video and I had more points to get to if anyone wanted to hear them, so here we are again. Importantly, you don't need to have watched that video for this one to make sense. These are all new. Some of them are quick production tips and others are sort of mindset shifts or concepts that really help things click into place for me. Please feel free to join in, correct me, or question me on anything that I'm talking about here. I want this to be a discussion as usual, not just me talking to a camera for a couple of minutes. So let's get right into it. And I might as well start with one of the most controversial ones, but just hear me out. Sometimes heavy compression on vocals can actually sound more natural and realistic depending on the recording. Many people prefer a high dynamic range and don't like overcompressed and squashed waveforms. I totally understand that and I'm generally there with you, but I'm going to explain why sometimes it is more natural and actually more realistic to use heavy compression. So if I'm in a room talking to you and I move my head backwards and forwards a few inches or even move around the room a few feet, the level of my voice that you perceive is going to be quite consistent. It's going to vary a small amount, but for a few fairly complex reasons, including psychoacoustic reasons, you're going to perceive my voice at the same level. If, however, you're speaking or singing into a microphone, especially when it's close mic'd, moving the head even a few inches can change the level of the signal output by 5, 10 or 15 dB easily up or down. And that sounds incredibly unnatural. If I was talking to you and I move my head a few inches and I double or triple in volume, that doesn't sound natural or realistic at all. And it's because ears are very complicated. Microphones are relatively very simple. So all of this boils down to don't assume that the raw, untouched signal from the microphone is actually the most natural and realistic representation of the sound that you're trying to record. Importantly, even if you level out the volume a little bit, you're still going to have big changes in the sort of emotion and the style of the vocal, and that is going to come through to the listener. It's more important to make sure you capture a really cool and emotional performance, no matter what the genre is. This one is going to be very quick. It's simply that phase is not polarity, and I've seen this spread all over the place. We'll keep this super quick because I know I've talked about this before. Polarity is simply a waveform's orientation above or below the central axis, so you can reverse a waveform's polarity like this, making the positives negatives and the negatives positive. Phase is the relationship of one or more signals to one or any number of signals. So you could shift two signals in and out of phase like this. Now the only thing you need to know here is that if you see a button on a plugin or your mixer that says phase reversal, polarity reversal, or phase shift, often these terms are used interchangeably, so you might press phase shift when it's actually reversing the polarity. So it's quite good to zoom in or check or use some kind of meter that lets you know whether you have applied a phase shift in time or whether you've simply reversed a waveform. Both of them might be the right answer for a particular situation, but if you want to know a ton more about phase and polarity, I have a dedicated video that I'll link up here or here. Left, right, and mid-side EQ is shockingly underutilized, at least in my opinion. Setting an EQ band to affect just one part of the mix, left, right, mid-side, can create immediate width and depth in that track without having to rely on other stereo or widening effects, although those are really cool. But it's also a really quick and clean way to fix issues in a mix or master that might only be affecting one channel, so you don't have to apply the EQ to the entire stereo signal if the issue is only occurring in the right channel or the left channel. Something you could try, for instance, would be taking a synth and maybe boosting the mids or the bass in the mid channel so that you've got a nice thick and full sound, but then taking these side channels and making them a little bit airy and boosting the trebles. So immediately you've got a really clean way to add a lot of depth and width to that particular synth track. How that's going to sound in the context of a mix, who knows, but it's something fun to try, and it can sometimes be cleaner than loading on a bunch of other stereo effects. And you're probably using an EQ that you already have loaded on that channel. 10 years in this industry has taught me that music studios without natural light or windows pretty much suck, at least for me. Unless it's a purpose-built facility, an incredible recording space that you go to, you pay for some session time in there, record your album. That's amazing. That's what those spaces are for. But working and living in one of these studios day in, day out doesn't work for me, and I don't think it works for the vast majority of people. Natural daylight is essential for your physical health, homeostasis, and your mental health. I recently made a detailed video about this. I went into a bunch of the science, but also, more importantly, I shared a bunch of practical advice for how you can feel a lot better while working in your music studio. Don't be afraid of having those windows in your studio. Natural light is better for almost everyone. I find this one very interesting, and it's that marketing often focuses on completely unimportant details when trying to sell you some sort of product, piece of gear, software, and this goes for almost all industries, but I have a good example in the music industry based on loudspeakers. I happen to be in a unique situation of having literally thousands of either products, pieces of gear, software presented to me or offered to me, or being asked to support a product in its launch. Now, the overwhelming majority of these I have refused over the years. It's interesting seeing the sorts of things many companies focus on when marketing to try and sort of mislead a consumer. And it's never by lying or anything like that. It's often just focusing your attention on something very unimportant. So I'll give you an example here. Almost all loudspeakers or studio monitors claim to have a completely flat or almost flat frequency response. So if that's the case, why do they all sound so vastly different? And anyone that's used 4, 5, 6 or more pairs of studio monitors know there's almost none that sound the same. So why do so many companies obsess over this flat frequency response? So I don't know the term for it, but it's some sort of false premise where these loudspeakers behind me, these are top of the range loudspeakers. They do have a completely flat frequency response, at least when measured in an anechoic chamber. In my room, of course, they don't sound completely flat, but that's not what makes them sound good. There's loads of other stuff in there. The time alignment of the drivers, the fact that the inside of those is an 100% analog design, hand-built in Switzerland. The cabinets and enclosures are incredibly heavy and they're sealed really well. There's all sorts of details that make those speakers good that are quite difficult to explain to a consumer. So other companies, other equipment can also say, well, look, we have this flat frequency response too, but it completely avoids the fact that they don't talk about maybe the chipsets or the components they use or how well the enclosures are built or who is building them. Are these being built by skilled engineers that really care? Or is it just cheap labor? They're very quickly assembled or maybe assembled by robots without the careful attention to detail that a human can have. This video isn't sponsored, so I'd like to take 30 seconds to talk about my plugin, BSA Reviver. It's a transient shaper that distinguishes between transient and sustained material in the lows, mids, and highs of your mixes, masters, or individual tracks. It then intelligently brings some of those transients back, which makes your mixes sound louder, punchier, and more dynamic. I've got a link to the free trial down below in the description, and it's also one of the best ways to support my videos. So let's get back to talking about speakers. And I don't want to be super cynical, because there are people working in marketing departments that do know what many consumers want, and they're doing great work, and they're just presenting the features of a device. So I don't want to sound like everything's some big conspiracy, but just go back to the drawing board and ask yourself, wait a minute, this company's going on and on about this feature, but do I actually even care about it? Is that what matters to me? And is it really going to help me create better music? Sometimes that's a yes, sometimes it's a no. This one is difficult to talk about, but it's that hearing loss and damage, I think, is a massive point of stigma and shame in this industry, and I think none of us talk about it enough. It's probably no exaggeration to say I've heard thousands, if not tens of thousands, of different discussions about gear, hardware, software, what's the best this, what's the best that, and I know that I've also contributed to this stuff, trying to rank gear, review gear, yet I've probably come across less than a dozen discussions about hearing loss, hearing damage, and improving your hearing over time, which is crazy because it's really the only thing that matters in this industry. There's so much incredible science and, information out there about protecting your hearing, about hearing loss, spotting the signs of hearing loss in this industry. If you start talking about maybe losing your hearing, we think that somehow devalues us in this marketplace and that we're not worth maybe hiring or working on a song or a project with. I did want to share some of the signs of hearing loss with you just in case you are suffering with any of these so that you can try and sort of catch something before it gets worse. So these can include difficulty in hearing conversations in loud spaces or potentially asking people to repeat themselves. You might be having difficulty in hearing high-pitched sounds. The difficult thing here is that you can't hear what you can't hear, so it's a complete blind spot. Another issue people can suffer with is difficulty in hearing some speech consonants, so S, H, F. You might be oversensitive to these, or you might struggle to hear them at all. And I see this often in my comment sections where some people will say those sounds are incredibly muffled and I need to add a bunch more treble. And other people will say those are cutting through and they're far too loud. If you think my voice right now sounds incredibly muffled or sounds really difficult to listen to in those sibilant sounds, it might be a sign that you're oversensitive to those sounds or that you're struggling to hear them. Sounds above about 18 kilohertz, I don't hear them clearly unless they're quite loud. So if something's very quiet and it's playing above 18k, I'm not going to hear much of that. So if I take an EQ on a sound and I boost it up, I can hear in that region, but I probably can't hear things perfectly at a normal volume. And that's quite normal and quite natural. But it's also why I'm taking hearing protection really seriously. For many years now, at least 5 or 6 years, I'm using earplugs and earbuds just about anywhere that's loud, concerts, gigs. Importantly, I am talking about preventable hearing loss and damage. Young people are suffering with this at an absolutely unprecedented rate. I hate that word unprecedented, but it is correct here, at rates not before known or seen. So if you need to take breaks from your headphones or you want to wear earplugs at concerts, gigs, and in any kind of loud spaces, there's absolutely zero shame or embarrassment with that. And I really mean this. If anyone is making fun of you or projecting any sort of embarrassment or cringe onto you, just remember they're either just trying to have a bit of fun or they're projecting some sort of deep pain and issue that they're working through, and it's really got nothing to do with you. And looking after yourself or your loved ones, there's never any shame in that. Okay, it got a little bit serious and heavy there at the end. So let me know what you think about any of those, and please, just like last time, share whatever you've learned as well. Maybe I can include and share some of those stories too in future videos and amplify your voices as well as just sharing the stuff that I've learned. So I genuinely hope you have a lovely weekend and a great week. Sorry about my voice in this video. I've been a bit sort of colded up for a couple of weeks. I've had quite a lot of sort of colds and flus this year. I don't really know what's up. It's quite unlike me, but I'm getting through it. So I'm going to take it easy, but I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.